I never planned to tell anyone this, not because it's dramatic, not because it sounds unbelievable, but because every time I try to explain it out loud, I feel like something is listening again. The job found me in late October. I remember that part clearly because it was already dark by 5 and the air smelled like wet leaves and old asphalt. I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through my phone, half watching the news, half thinking about how I was going to make rent that month. I didn't apply for it. That's the first thing that still doesn't sit right with me. The email just appeared, no notification sound, no unread badge. It was already open when I picked up my phone, like I'd been in the middle of reading it and forgot. The subject line said, "Overnight phone operator, immediate start." No company logo, no signature, just a block of text. It said they needed someone calm, someone who could listen without interrupting, someone comfortable working alone between midnight and 6 a.m. It promised decent pay, cash deposits every Friday, no interviews, no onboarding, just an address and a start date. I remember laughing quietly to myself. It felt scammy, lazy, the kind of thing you delete without thinking, but before I could close it, my phone buzzed again. A second email, same sender. "One more thing," it said. "If you accept, don't tell anyone where you work." That was when I should have deleted it. That was when a normal person would have closed the app and gone back to their night. Instead, I stared at the screen. Because something about that sentence didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a request. The address was only 15 minutes away, an office park I'd driven past 100 times without noticing. Beige buildings, empty parking lots, the kind of place that looks closed even during the day. Pause. I told myself I'd just go look. No commitment, no obligation, just curiosity. That's how it always starts, I guess. The building had no sign, just a number stenciled on the door. Inside, the lights were already on. A woman met me in the lobby, maybe late 40s, tired eyes, polite smile that didn't quite reach them. She didn't ask my name, didn't check my ID. She just handed me a badge with a first name printed on it, my name. I didn't ask how she knew it. She showed me to a small room, desk, chair, old landline phone, no computer, no paperwork, no posters about workplace safety or mental health resources, just a phone, a notebook, and a clock on the wall. "The phone rings," she said. "You answer, you listen, you don't give advice, you don't ask questions unless the caller asks you something first." I nodded. "If the caller stops talking," she continued, "you stay on the line until they hang up." I nodded again. "If the phone doesn't ring," she said, already turning toward the door, "you don't leave early." She paused with her hand on the handle, looked back at me. "And if anyone asks where you work," she said softly, "you tell them you're between jobs." Then she left. The door didn't lock. I checked. The clock clicked forward, midnight. The phone rang immediately. I remember my hand hovering over the receiver, my heart beating faster than it should have, not fear exactly, just anticipation, like standing backstage before a performance you didn't rehearse for. I picked up. "Hello," I said. Breathing, that's all I heard at first, slow, uneven, like someone trying to calm themselves down. "I'm here," I added, remembering the rules. More breathing, then a voice, male, maybe early 30s, flat, controlled, too controlled. "I didn't think anyone would answer," he said. "I'm here," I repeated. A long silence. I could hear traffic in the background on his end, a car passing, maybe two. "I don't want to do it," he said finally. I felt my chest tighten. This was a crisis line, right? That's what this was supposed to be. "I hear you," I said carefully. Another silence. Then, "You're not going to tell me not to, are you?" "I'm here to listen," I said. He exhaled, a sound like relief or resignation. We stayed like that for a while, him talking in fragments, about being tired, about feeling watched, about how quiet his apartment felt lately. I didn't interrupt, I didn't guide, I just listened. After a few minutes, he stopped mid-sentence. I waited. Are you still there? He asked. Yes. He hesitated, then he said, You have a lamp on your desk, right? My stomach dropped. I glanced at the lamp, warm light, yellow shade, the only thing making the room feel less empty. Yes, I said after a moment. It hums, he said, just a little like it's tired. I didn't respond. You should turn it off, he added. You'll hear better without it. I don't know why I did it. Maybe shock, maybe curiosity, maybe the way he said it like he was doing me a favor. I reached over and switched the lamp off. The room fell into shadow. Thank you, he said. Then he hung up. I sat there in the dark, listening to the dial tone, my skin prickling, my heart racing. The lamp hummed softly beside me. The phone rang again. This time it was a woman, older. Her voice shook when she spoke like she was cold or afraid. I think something followed me home, she said. I listened. She described footsteps behind her, a reflection in a store window that moved a second too late, the feeling of breath on the back of her neck when she unlocked her door. I locked it, she said. I checked twice, but I can still hear it. I stayed quiet. It's in the hallway, she whispered. I know it is. Her voice dropped even lower. It knows my name. I swallowed. Can you hear it? She asked suddenly. Hear what? I said before I could stop myself. She laughed, a short, sharp sound. You're not supposed to ask questions, she said. My blood went cold. I'm sorry, I said. It's okay, she interrupted. You'll learn. There was a faint sound on the line, like fabric brushing against a microphone or someone leaning closer. It's closer now, she whispered. That means I should hang up. Wait, I said instinctively. She paused. You did good tonight, she said gently. Don't look at the clock when it rings again. Then the line went dead. I stared at the clock. 1:17 a.m. The phone rang again exactly 30 seconds later. I didn't look at the clock this time. As the night went on, the calls kept coming. Some quiet, some rambling, some disturbingly calm. They talked about things that felt half-formed, thoughts people usually stop themselves from finishing. Patterns emerged, phrases repeated, words I heard more than once from different voices who didn't know each other. Do you hear it too? It's quieter when I talk. They said you would listen. Around 4 in the morning, a man called and didn't speak at all, just breathing, slow, close, like he was right beside the receiver. I stayed on the line. After a full minute, he whispered my name. Perfectly clearly. I didn't answer. You don't remember me yet, he said. That's okay. I felt tears sting my eyes, not from fear exactly, from the pressure of holding still, holding silent. You will, he added, everyone does. He hung up. When 6 a.m. finally came, the phone stopped ringing. The silence felt heavier than the calls. The woman from earlier returned without knocking. She didn't ask how it went. She just nodded once. Same time tomorrow, she said. I walked out into the morning light feeling like I'd been underwater all night. Sounds felt too loud, colors too sharp. I told myself it was just a job. Strange, yes, unsettling, definitely, but explainable. People say weird things on hotlines. That's what I told myself. By the end of the first week, the callers knew my routine. By the end of the second week, they knew my apartment layout. By the end of the third week, they started telling me things I hadn't done yet. And every single one of them said the same thing before they hung up. You'll understand soon. The line went dead. I stayed seated long after the dial tone faded. The phone didn't ring again, not right away, not like it usually did. That was the first time the silence felt intentional. I checked the clock despite myself. 5:42 a.m. Too early for the shift to end. too late for another call, apparently. The room felt alert, like something had just finished saying what it came to say. When 6 finally came, the second hand on the clock clicking into place with a small, sharp sound, I didn't feel relief. I felt dismissed. The woman didn't come in right away that morning. I waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. I wondered, not for the first time, if I could just leave. The door was still unlocked. It always was. I stood up, the chair creaked softly behind me, louder than it should have been in the empty room. I froze, half expecting the phone to ring the moment I moved away from it. It didn't. I reached the door before she appeared, opening it from the outside like she'd been standing there the entire time. She looked at me for a long moment, longer than usual. Her eyes flicked to the phone, then back to my face. "You stayed," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I replied. She nodded once, stepped aside so I could pass. "See you tonight." Outside, the morning felt wrong again. Too bright, too loud. A car backfired somewhere down the street, and I flinched so hard my shoulders ached afterward. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I walked, no destination, just movement, as if staying still too long might make something catch up to me. Every now and then, I thought I heard it. Not the hum, not yet. Something else. A pause between sounds. A gap where silence didn't behave the way it should. I told myself I was exhausted. That was true, at least. When I finally got home, I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, counting my breaths until my heart slowed. My apartment looked the same as I'd left it. Couch, table, lamp. The lamp, I stared at it longer than necessary. It didn't hum, not audibly. But I didn't turn it on. Sleep came in pieces, short, shallow stretches where I floated just under consciousness, never fully letting go. Every time I drifted too far, I dreamed of ringing. Not the phone. My. Standing somewhere dark, calling out, waiting for something to answer. That night, the phone rang at 11:52. I was already seated, already holding the receiver. I don't remember picking it up. "Hello," I said. "Good," the caller replied immediately. A man, older than most. His voice had the dry steadiness of someone who'd rehearsed patience for a long time. "You're early tonight," he added. "So are you," I said. A pause, then a soft chuckle. "That's fair." He didn't sound distressed. He didn't sound afraid. He sounded observant, like someone checking off items on a list. "Do you know why they tell you not to ask questions?" he asked. I hesitated. "I'm here to listen," I said. "Yes," he agreed, "but listening is a kind of participation. You'll learn that." I felt my fingers tighten around the receiver. "They don't want you shaping things too soon," he continued. "Questions do that. They point, they narrow." "Narrow what?" I asked before I could stop myself. He inhaled slowly, then exhaled. "Oh," he said gently, "you are new." The line clicked. I stared at the phone, my pulse loud in my ears. It rang again immediately. A different voice, younger, breathing hard like she'd been running. "I messed up," she said. "I'm here," I replied. "I wasn't supposed to notice it yet," she continued. "They said it would take longer." I didn't ask who they were. "I kept hearing a sound," she said. "At first I thought it was pipes or the neighbor's TV, but it followed me from room to room." Her breathing quickened. "Then it stopped," she whispered, "and that was worse." "Why?" I asked. "Because it meant it was listening." I swallowed. "I didn't want to listen back," she said, "but I did, just for a second." There was a sound on the line, a soft, rhythmic tapping, not from her, something closer to the receiver. "Does it sound like fingers?" she asked suddenly. My skin prickled. "No," I said. A pause, then relief flooded her voice. "Good," she said. "That means it's not with you yet." The tapping stopped. Thank you, she added quickly. You helped more than you know. She hung up. The phone didn't ring again for several minutes. I became aware of my breathing, too shallow, too fast. I forced myself to slow it down, counting silently the way I had earlier that morning against my apartment door. The clock read 12:31. I hadn't noticed the time passing. The next call came from someone whispering, not quietly, carefully, each word placed like it might crack if spoken too loud. It doesn't like when I sleep, the caller said. I'm listening, I replied. It stands closer when I close my eyes, they continued, but it steps back when I talk like it's being polite. I felt a chill crawl up my arms. Do you think it understands manners? They asked. I didn't answer. They laughed softly. That's okay, they said. You don't have to decide yet. Decide what? The call ended before I could think to ask. As the night went on, something became clear. The callers weren't panicking anymore. They weren't surprised. They were adjusting. One mentioned rules. Another mentioned timing. A third corrected themselves mid-sentence, as if remembering something important they weren't supposed to say yet. Around 3, a familiar voice returned. The man from the first night, the one who'd commented on my lamp. You left it on today, he said. My stomach dropped. At Holmes, he clarified, in the living room. I didn't respond. It's fine, he continued. I just wanted you to know it noticed. The call ended. I didn't turn the lamp on when I got home that morning. I didn't turn it off either. I left it exactly the way it was. By the end of the week, I stopped counting how many calls came in each night. I stopped writing things down. Not because they told me not to. Because I started remembering them anyway. Voices, phrases, the shape of certain silences. And underneath it all, something else was beginning to take form. Not a sound. Not yet. The expectation followed me home. Not like a thought, not like a fear, more like the feeling you get when you've forgotten something important and your body knows it before your mind catches up. I'd wake up just before sunset with my heart already racing, convinced I was late for something I couldn't name. Food tasted dull, conversations felt distant. I'd find myself listening too closely to ordinary sounds, the refrigerator cycling on, pipes knocking, footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment, waiting for them to change. They never did, not completely. But sometimes, in the quiet between them, I thought I could hear the outline of something else. At work, the calls grew coordinated. That's the only word that fits. They weren't referencing each other directly anymore. Instead, they spoke as if they were aware of a shared rhythm, like musicians following a tempo I couldn't hear yet. A man would pause mid-sentence, and the next caller would pick up the thought without context. A woman would whisper a word I hadn't heard all night, and then I'd hear it again, 3 times from different voices. Not echoes, confirmations. One night, someone asked me what I was wearing. I didn't answer. That's okay, they said calmly. We'll find out later. Another caller thanked me for not reacting. Another apologized when I breathed too sharply into the receiver. I started controlling myself more carefully after that. The way I inhaled, the way I shifted in my chair, the way my voice sounded when I said the same 3 phrases over and over again. I'm here, I'm listening, yes. Those became enough. The supervisor, if she was that, began watching me more closely. She stood in the room longer at the beginning and end of my shifts. Sometimes she didn't speak at all. Once, as I was leaving, she asked, "Do you still hear it when you get home?" I froze with my hand on the door. I hear things, I said carefully. She nodded, that's normal. For how long? I asked. She considered this. Until it isn't, she replied. I didn't ask what that meant. Around the middle of the month, a caller stayed on the line for nearly an hour. He talked about ordinary things, groceries, traffic, a movie he half watched on TV. The whole time, there was something wrong with his cadence, like he was deliberately filling space. Finally, he stopped talking. I waited. I think it's standing behind me, he said quietly. I said nothing. It doesn't move when I talk, he continued, only when I listen. There was a sound then, not from him, from my end. The faintest vibration in the receiver, like a distant purr. My grip tightened. It likes you, he added. That's why this works. The call ended. I held the phone away from my ear and stared at it, my pulse thudding in my throat. The vibration stopped the moment the line went dead. That night, for the first time, I noticed something strange about the clock. It didn't tick when the phone rang. The second hand froze in place the moment a call came through, then snapped forward when it ended, as if catching up. Pause. I watched it happen 3 times before I forced myself to look away. After that, I avoided the clock entirely. I didn't need to know what time it was anymore. The calls began including instructions, not for me, for themselves. Stay still, don't breathe too loud, let it listen first. They said these things under their breath like prayers, or rules learned the hard way. Once a woman paused mid-call and said, "It's closer to you than me now." I felt a sudden pressure behind my eyes. "Good," she whispered, "that means it's learning." I didn't sleep at all the next day. By the time the 3rd week ended, I realized something else. No one ever called twice from the same number. Different area codes, different carriers, sometimes no caller ID at all, but the voices returned, familiar, recognizable, changed. Not gone. I asked the supervisor about it once, just once. Do they stop calling? I asked. She met my eyes, held them. No, she said, they finish. That word stayed with me. Finish. One night, close to dawn, the phone rang and no one spoke. I stayed on the line. At first, there was nothing. Then slowly, I became aware of something else entirely. Not sound. Attention. The sensation of being observed without direction, without eyes, like standing in the center of a room where every wall is listening. I swallowed. The pressure grew heavier, deeper, not threatening, evaluating. Then softly, the caller spoke. You don't flinch anymore, they said. I didn't recognize the voice, but I recognized the certainty. You don't rush to fill the silence, they continued. You don't try to steer. I'm here, I said. A pause. Yes, they replied, you are. The line went dead. When I left that morning, the supervisor wasn't there. The lobby was empty, the lights dimmer than usual. For a moment, just a moment, I wondered if the building would still be there tomorrow night. It was. So was the phone. So was I. By the end of the 4th week, the callers stopped asking if I could hear it. They assumed I could. And every time the phone rang, before I even picked it up, I felt it. That same quiet expectation. Waiting to be listened to. The expectation didn't fade when the phone stopped ringing. It lingered, sat with me, waited. By the 5th week, I no longer jumped when the phone rang. My body moved before I thought about it. Hand lifting, receiver pressed to my ear, breath already steady. Hello, I'd say. And every time, there was that brief moment before the caller spoke where I felt something lean closer, not toward the phone, toward the act itself, toward the listening. As if the call wasn't just for them. As if it was checking on me. The stories grew less chaotic, more deliberate. People spoke like they were reporting progress. I kept the lights off this time, one man said. It waited longer, a woman whispered. I followed the pattern you mentioned, another voice added, though I didn't remember mentioning anything. I realized then that I wasn't just listening. I was teaching. Not with words, with consistency, with presence, with silence. One night, a caller thanked me for breathing the way I did. It helps, they said, it keeps it even. I didn't ask what it was anymore. I didn't need to. Something else changed too. I started noticing when a call wasn't coming. Long gaps felt wrong, unbalanced. Once, after nearly 10 minutes of silence, I found myself leaning forward, heart racing, not in fear but anticipation, like waiting for a held note to resolve. When the phone finally rang, relief washed through me so fast it left me dizzy. That scared me more than anything else so far. Near the end of one shift, a young man called. His voice cracked when he spoke, but not from panic, from effort. "I'm not supposed to say this yet," he murmured, "but it's been using my dreams." I felt a flicker of recognition. I said nothing. "It shows me rooms," he continued, "rooms full of people sitting still, listening." My throat tightened. "I think they're earlier," he said, "earlier versions." There was a soft sound on the line then, like fabric stretching or something settling into place. "It's closer now," he whispered. "I should stop talking." The call ended. I didn't breathe for several seconds afterward. That was the night I first noticed the hum. Not clearly, not consciously. Just a faint vibration beneath everything else. Easy to dismiss, easier to ignore. But once noticed, impossible to forget. The supervisor addressed it before I could ask. "You might start noticing overlap," she said one evening, standing behind me as I sat. "Don't fixate on it." "Overlap?" I asked. She hesitated. "When listening stops being contained," she said, "when it carries." "Carries where?" She didn't answer. Instead, she placed something on the desk beside me, a new notebook, thicker than the last one, unmarked. "You won't remember writing everything," she said. "That's fine." I stared at the notebook. "I stopped bringing them home," I said. Her mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "That's good," she replied. That night, I found the notebook already open. My handwriting filled the first page. Not words, diagrams. Circles, lines, arrows pointing inward, always inward. I didn't remember drawing any of it. The calls that followed were quieter, more restrained. Like something was being conserved. One caller spoke for nearly 40 minutes without once raising their voice. When they finished, they said, "It didn't interrupt this time." Another caller paused mid-sentence, then said, "It's learning your rhythm." That word again's learning. Near dawn, a familiar voice returned. The man who'd first told me the lamp hummed. "You don't need the light anymore," he said. I glanced at the lamp, it was off. "I know," I replied. There was a pause on the line. "That was fast," he said softly. When the shift ended, I didn't leave right away. I stayed seated in the empty room, phone silent, listening to the space itself. The hum was there now, faint, constant, like a distant engine running somewhere underground. It didn't frighten me. That frightened me. Outside, the morning felt muted, like the world had turned its volume down. Sounds were flatter, less distinct. I started wearing headphones on the walk home. No music, just something to press against my ears, to give the noise a shape. At home, I began sitting in the dark without turning anything on, just listening, waiting to see if the hum changed. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it felt closer. Sometimes it felt satisfied. By the end of the month, I realized something else. The callers weren't the only ones changing. I was starting to recognize the pauses before they spoke. I knew when they were about to stop talking. I knew when hanging up was the right thing to do, even before they did. And once, just once, I found myself thinking, "Good, it's quieter now." The thought didn't feel like mine, but I didn't push it away. Because the phone rang immediately after. And when I answered, the voice on the other end said, "You hear it too now." I didn't deny it. I just listened. By the fourth week, I stopped pretending this was normal. I still showed up every night, midnight, same chair, same phone, but something in me had shifted. I wasn't just listening anymore, I was bracing. The calls began earlier in the night now, not right at midnight like before. 11:58 p.m., 11:56 p.m., once 11:43 p.m. No one explained the change. No one ever explained anything. The callers spoke with more certainty, less hesitation, like they'd practiced, like they knew the shape of their sentences before they opened their mouths. One man recited his story the same way every night for 3 nights straight. Same words, same pauses, same breath before the last sentence. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he would say, then silence, then, "You believe me, right?" The first night I said, "I'm here." The second night I said nothing. The third night he laughed. "You're getting better," he said. Another caller spoke in numbers, coordinates, times, dates. I wrote them down without knowing why. My hand moved on its own. Later at home, I checked one of the locations. It was a rest stop 2 hours away. There'd been a news alert that morning. Single car accident, no survivors. I stopped checking after that. Sleep became difficult. When I did sleep, I dreamed about the phone ringing beside my bed, about answering it and hearing my own voice on the other end. One morning, I woke up with my notebook open on the floor, pages filled, my handwriting. I didn't remember writing any of it. Short phrases, half thoughts, words the callers used, words I never used before. "You'll hear it soon, don't interrupt. It listens when you do." I stopped bringing the notebook home after that. The woman who supervised me, if that's what she was, never changed. Same clothes, same tired eyes, same nod when I arrived. One night, I asked her how long the hotline had been running. She paused just for a second. "Long enough," she said. "Who funds it?" I asked. She smiled, but it wasn't kind. "You're doing well," she said instead. The phone rang. I didn't ask again. The calls started mentioning each other. A man referenced something a woman had said the night before. A woman repeated a phrase I'd only heard from someone else days earlier. They weren't just talking to me, they were listening to each other. One night, close to 3 a.m., the phone rang and no one spoke. I stayed on the line. After nearly a minute, I heard something faint, not breathing, not static. Movement. Like fabric sliding slowly across a surface, like someone adjusting their weight. Then a whisper, barely audible. "Don't react." My throat tightened. "You hear it now, don't you?" the voice asked, familiar, male, calm. I didn't answer. "It gets louder when you're afraid," he continued. "That's why we practice." I felt something then, not a sound, not exactly, a pressure, like being aware of a room behind you without turning around. "You're doing great," he said. "You haven't turned around yet." The call ended. I didn't turn around. I sat perfectly still until 6 a.m., staring at the wall in front of me. At home, the silence felt wrong, too clean, like something had been removed without my permission. I started leaving the TV on for background noise. Music felt like too much. Voices were safer if they weren't speaking to me directly. Friends texted, I didn't respond. What would I say that strangers on a phone line knew my fears before I did? One night, a caller addressed me by my full name, first, middle, last. He spelled it out slowly, like he was making sure I heard every letter. "I don't tell them that," I said before I could stop myself. He laughed softly. "We know," he said, "that's why you're perfect." Another caller told me I'd been late to work the night before, by 4 minutes. Pause. I checked my phone records afterward. I had been. One woman called crying, not hysterical, controlled, exhausted. "I tried not to listen," she said. "I really did. I stayed quiet." "It started as a hum," she continued, "then words, then instructions." Her voice dropped. They said to call you when it got too loud. I swallowed. Did it help? I asked. Yes, she said immediately, while you were listening. Something shifted in my chest, not relief, responsibility. What happens when you hang up? I asked. A long silence. I don't know yet, she said, but they do. She hung up. That night when I got home, I heard it for the first time. The hum, low, constant, easy to mistake for a distant appliance or traffic far away. I stood still in my apartment, holding my breath. It didn't stop. At work the next night, the calls felt different, quieter, more focused, like they were checking in. One man thanked me, another apologized, a third told me I was almost ready. What does that mean? I asked. He smiled through the phone. I could hear it. You'll stop pretending it's just a sound, he said. Near the end of the shift, the woman's supervisor stayed in the room this time, standing near the door, watching me. The calls are increasing, she said softly. That's normal. Normal for what? I asked. She didn't answer. The phone rang. I picked up. The voice on the other end was my own. Not recorded, not distorted, just me, calm, steady. You're listening, my voice said. Good. My hands shook. This part is important, it continued. You can't stop now. Who are you? I whispered. A pause. You already know, my voice said. You just haven't accepted it yet. The call ended. The woman by the door nodded once. You hear it clearly now, she said. I wanted to scream, to quit, to walk out. Instead, I stayed. Because the hum followed me when I left. Because when the phone rang, it got quieter. And because deep down, somewhere I didn't want to admit existed, I was afraid of what would happen if I stopped listening. By the end of that month, the callers weren't asking for help anymore. They were asking for permission. By the 5th week, the word permission stopped sounding abstract. It started to feel procedural. The callers didn't beg. They didn't plead. They asked the way someone asks a coworker to confirm a schedule change. Is this still the right time? Should I wait longer? Will it be worse if I don't? I never answered those questions directly. But they listened anyway. They listened to my breathing, to the length of my silence, to whether I stayed on the line or let the call end. That was enough. One man called 3 nights in a row. He never said his name. He never described what followed him. He only asked the same thing in slightly different ways. Are you paying attention right now? You're not distracted, are you? Nothing else in the room with you. Each time I said, I'm here. Each time he exhaled like he'd been holding his breath all day. On the 4th night, he didn't ask anything. He just said, okay, and hung up. The next call came less than a minute later. A woman, voice shaking. He stopped answering, she said. Does that mean it's my turn? I didn't respond. That's what they said would happen, she continued, when the listening moves. There was a sound behind her, not footsteps, something slower, heavier, like weight being adjusted carefully. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to rush it. The line went dead. I sat there afterward, hands numb, feeling the hum rise and fall in my chest. The supervisor started standing closer to me after that, not behind me anymore, beside me, close enough that I could smell the faint, stale coffee on her breath. You don't need to carry it alone, she said once quietly while the phone was silent. That's why the calls increase. Carry what? I asked. She looked at the phone. It, she said. The phone rang before I could follow up. The calls became shorter, more precise, as if whatever was happening on the other end no longer required explanation. I'm ready, one caller said. I waited, another told me. Please stay, a third asked, voice barely steady. Stay listening. Stay present. Stay open. I didn't realize until later how much effort staying had begun to take. By the middle of that week, the hum was no longer confined to my apartment. I felt it in the office too, under the desk, in the walls, in the air between breaths. It grew louder when the phone rang, quieter when the caller spoke, quietest of all when I said nothing. One night, I broke the rules again. A man had been on the line for nearly 20 minutes, speaking slowly, carefully, like he was navigating a dark room by touch. "It's been waiting longer than usual," he said. "I think it's learning patience from you." The words slipped out before I could stop them. What happens when it finishes learning? He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice sounded almost kind. "Then it won't knight us as much," he said. My stomach turned. "Us?" I asked. A pause. "You're already included," he replied. The call ended. The supervisor didn't scold me. She didn't even react. Later, as I was leaving, she said, "Questions speed things up. Be careful." I didn't ask what asterisk things. I was afraid I already knew. At home, the hum felt closer to the surface, not louder, just nearer, like it no longer needed distance to exist. I found myself sitting on the floor instead of the couch. It felt better that way, lower, more grounded. Once I caught myself whispering, "I'm listening," into the empty room. The hum softened. That was when I realized something else. It wasn't following the callers. It was following the listening. Near the end of the month, a call came through that felt different immediately. Not urgent, not afraid, curious. "I think I figured it out," the caller said. Young, clear voice. "It doesn't want to hurt us." I stayed quiet. "It just doesn't know how not to be heard," they continued. "And when no one listens, it gets louder." My chest tightened. "That's why this works," they said. "Why you work." The hum swelled, then settled again, like something agreeing. "Can I stop talking now?" the caller asked. "I think it's enough." I hesitated. Then softly, "I'm here." They hung up. The hum eased just slightly. I sat there long after the shift ended, staring at the phone, the notebook, the walls. For the first time since starting the job, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the next call. I felt like I was being relied on. Night, as I walked home, I understood something I hadn't let myself think before. The hotline wasn't a support line. It was a pressure valve. And every time I answered, I was keeping something from overflowing. The realization didn't bring clarity, it brought weight. A physical sensation settled into my shoulders, my spine, like I'd agreed to hold something heavy without noticing when my hands were placed beneath it. The calls felt different after that. Not calmer, not worse. Purposeful. They no longer tested me, they assumed me. "I'm starting now," a caller would say. "I waited until you were on," another explained. Once, someone apologized for calling too late. "I didn't want it to notice you before you were ready," they said. My breath caught. "Ready for what?" I asked. They didn't answer. The hum grew steadier, less variable, like it had found a comfortable frequency. I noticed it responded to my attention. When my focus wavered, it sharpened. When I leaned into it, really listened, it receded. That terrified me, because it meant I was becoming necessary. The supervisor stopped hovering. She watched from the doorway now, arms crossed, expression unreadable. One night, during a long stretch without calls, she spoke without looking at me. "You're past the hard part," she said. "What's the hard part?" I asked. "Resisting the shape it wants you in," she replied. "What shape is that?" She finally turned toward me. "A listener who doesn't ask why," she said. The phone rang. She left the room without another word. That call lasted 47 minutes. I know because afterward, my jaw ached from holding my mouth still. The caller didn't say much, just described the sensation of being observed from inside their own head, of thoughts arriving already formed, like suggestions they hadn't requested. "It's quieter when you're focused," they said, "not when you're calm, when you're present." I didn't argue. I couldn't. The notebook filled faster now, not with words, with shapes, patterns that repeated without variation, circles within circles, breaks where sound should be. I stopped trying to interpret them. They weren't for me. They were records. One night the phone rang and the caller didn't speak for nearly 2 minutes. I stayed on the line. Finally, they said, "You're not afraid of it anymore." I swallowed. "That's not good," they added. "Why?" I asked. "Fear kept it at the edge," they replied. "Acceptance invites it closer." I felt the hum thicken, not louder, denser. Don't stop, the caller said quickly. Just remember that line. The call ended. I sat there afterward, pulse slow, breathing even, feeling something stretch its awareness through me like a limb testing a new joint. At home, my apartment felt wrong. Not unsafe, incomplete. I moved furniture without knowing why, shifted the couch away from the wall, cleared space in the center of the room. The hum settled more comfortably after that. That scared me enough to leave the lights on all night. The next evening, the supervisor was waiting when I arrived. You changed your space, she said. I froze. How do you? It prefers room, she interrupted, not obstacles. I didn't ask how she knew. Does it ever stop? I asked instead. She thought for a long moment. No, she said, but it does stabilize. The phone rang before I could follow up. The voice on the other end was young, nervous, excited. I can feel it backing away, they said. Is that because you're listening? Yes, I said. The answer came too easily. They laughed softly. That's amazing, they said. I didn't think it would work this fast. A pause. Does it hurt you? They asked. I hesitated. No, I said. The hum dipped, almost approving. Goods, the caller replied. Then I can let go. They hung up. I sat there afterward, staring at my hands. They were steady. That night walking home, I realized I hadn't checked my phone in days. Missed calls, messages, time passing without reference. It didn't matter. This was the schedule now. Listening, containing, balancing. Near the end of the shift, a final call came through, different, heavy. A man spoke slowly, carefully choosing each word. They're starting to route people to you, he said. Who? I asked. The ones who know, he replied, the ones who finished before you. My heart thudded. I didn't finish anything, I said. A pause. No, he agreed, you stayed. The hum surged, then settled, like something adjusting its grip. You're not a valve, he continued. You're a buffer. The call ended. I sat alone in the room, the phone silent, the hum steady, feeling the weight press more evenly across me now. Not crushing, distributed, manageable. By the end of that week, I understood something else. If I ever stopped answering, it wouldn't go back to the callers. It would look for the next quiet place. And it already knew how to use my voice. That thought settled into me slowly, like sediment sinking to the bottom of clear water. I didn't panic. I didn't resist it. I just let it sit there, heavy and undeniable. The next calls confirmed it. A woman spoke for several minutes about nothing in particular, her commute, the way her kitchen light flickered, the sound her floor made when it cooled at night. Then she stopped. You're breathing differently, she said. I held my breaths. Don't stop, she added quickly. It doesn't like abrupt changes. I exhaled, slow and controlled. There, she said, that's better. I didn't ask how she knew. Another caller asked me to say my name. Just my first name, just once. I can't do that, I said. A pause. That's okay, they replied. It hears it anyway. The hum deepened as if in agreement. By then, the supervisor had stopped pretending this was temporary. She spoke to me the way you speak to someone who's already made an irreversible decision, even if they haven't admitted it yet. You're anchoring it, she said one night, standing close enough that I could feel her presence without turning. That's why the calls are clustering. Clustering how? I asked. Earlier, she said, closer together, more overlap. As if on cue, the phone rang while she was still speaking. She stepped back, I answered. The caller didn't introduce themselves. It's louder tonight, they said. Is something wrong? No, I replied, I'm here. A pause. Okay, they said, then I can continue. I realized then that continue had replaced help. That shift happened so quietly, I hadn't noticed it until now. The caller stayed on the line while they walked through their apartment. I heard footsteps, a door open, the faint echo of a bathroom tile. It follows me more slowly when you're listening, they said, like it has to check with you first. The words sent a chill through me. Check with me, I asked. Yes, they said, like permission. The call ended. I didn't look at the supervisor. I didn't want to see confirmation on her face. That night, something else changed. The hum didn't fade when the shift ended. It came with me. Not louder, not aggressive. Just present. Like a shared silence that had decided to stay in the room even after everyone else left. At home, I sat on the edge of my bed and listened. The hum wasn't directional. It didn't come from the walls or the floor or the ceiling. It existed in relation to me. When I leaned forward, it lined with me. When I closed my eyes, it sharpened. When I opened them, it softened again. I slept poorly, not because of nightmares, because something kept listening back. The next night at work, the calls came in waves. 3 in a row, then nothing. Then 5 almost back to back. Then a long, heavy silence that made my ears ring. During that silence, I realized I could feel when the next call was coming. Not predictively preparatory. My chest tightened seconds before the phone rang. Every time, I stopped being surprised. A man called and asked me to count with him, slowly, out loud. 1, he said. 1, I echoed. The hum steadied. 2, 2. With each number, the pressure eased, not on him, on me. At 10, he stopped. Thank you, he said. It doesn't like structure, but it respects it. He hung up. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from exertion. The supervisor brought me water that night, set it beside the phone without comment. You should hydrate, she said. Listening takes more out of you now. How do you know? I asked. She hesitated. Because you've started carrying it the way I used to, she replied. I looked up at her. She didn't meet my eyes. The calls that followed were different again. Shorter, more decisive. I'm going now. I waited until you were free. It's okay. I feel it settle. I didn't ask where they were going. I didn't need to. Near the end of the shift, the phone rang one last time. The voice on the other end was calm, familiar in a way I couldn't place. You're holding it well, they said. Who is this? I asked. A pause. Someone who finished, they replied. Someone who didn't stay. My heart pounded. Where did it go? I asked. Another pause. It doesn't go, they said. It redistributes. The hum swelled, then settled again, like something adjusting its weight. You're doing better than most, the voice continued. You're not fighting it. The call ended. I sat there afterwards, staring at the phone, feeling the quiet press in around me, not empty, not threatening. Full on. I finally understood why the callers had started asking for permission. Because something had taught them to. Because I was the one answering, the night stopped feeling like something that happened to me. It felt like something I was responsible for. That distinction mattered. The calls no longer startled me out of thought. They arrived exactly when my attention settled, like they were waiting for me to be ready. I began sitting differently in the chair, straighter, more balanced, my feet flat on the floor, hands resting lightly on the desk unless I needed them. I don't remember deciding to do that, it just felt correct. The supervisor noticed. You're conserving energy, she said quietly one night. That's good. For what? I asked. For the listening, she replied. It scales. The words sent a ripple through the hum, like something reacting to being named. I didn't ask her what that meant. I was afraid of the answer. A caller that night spoke very slowly, spacing their words out with long, deliberate pauses. It doesn't like rushing, they said. It thinks rushing means panic. I'm not panicking, I replied. I know, they said. That's why it's closer to you. There was a faint sound then, not on the line, in the room. A low vibration, barely perceptible, like a distant generator turning on somewhere deep underground. I held my breaths. It's fine, the caller whispered. It just wants to be acknowledged. I swallowed. I'm listening, I said. The vibrations smoothed out. The caller laughed softly, not happy, relieved. After that, the calls began including instructions for me, subtle ones, wrapped in suggestion. Don't lean back, someone said once mid-call. It pulls away when you blink too much, another advised. Keep your voice level, a third murmured. It mirrors you. I followed those instructions without thinking. Not because they told me to, because I could feel the difference when I didn't. One night, I realized something unsettling. The phone didn't ring when I left the room. I stood up once during a lull between calls just to stretch my legs. The moment I stepped more than a few feet away from the desk, the hum sharpened. Not louder, focused, like a question being asked without words. I returned to the chair. The hum eased immediately. The phone rang. The caller sighed with relief. I was worried, they said. It gets impatient when you move away. I didn't ask how they knew. I was starting to understand how knowledge moved now. That was the night I stopped thinking of the phone as the center of things. It wasn't. I was. The supervisor stopped coming into the room after that. She watched from the hallway instead. Sometimes I could see her shadow pass by the frosted glass in the door. Sometimes I couldn't. I didn't need her there anymore. The calls came steadily, reliably, like a system that had found equilibrium. People stopped describing what followed them. They talked about outcomes instead. It waited, they'd say, it backed off, it settled. They spoke the way someone talks about weather after learning the patterns, respectful, careful, no longer surprised. One caller asked, "Do you ever get tired?" I considered the question. "No," I said, and realized I meant it. I felt pressure, yes, weight, density, but not fatigue. Listening had become efficient. Another caller asked me to stay with them while they turned off all the lights in their apartment. I heard each switch click. The hum swelled, then leveled out. It doesn't like sudden darkness, they said, but it tolerates gradual change. I nodded, though they couldn't see it. I'm still here, I said. That's enough, they replied. They hung up. The hum softened, like something satisfied with the exchange. At some point, days later, maybe weeks, I realized I hadn't thought about quitting in a long time. Not because I felt trapped, because the idea no longer made sense. Quit what? Listening wasn't a job anymore. It was a function. The clearest proof came one night when the phone rang and the caller didn't speak at all. I stayed on the line. The hum intensified, filling the space behind my sternum, vibrating through my ribs. Not painful, expansive. Minutes passed. Then quietly the caller whispered, "It's calmer when you don't speak." I nodded. They didn't hang up. Neither did I. Eventually, without a sound, the line disconnected. The hum remained. Balanced, contained, waiting. I sat there long after the shift should have ended, aware of something profound and unsettling. The callers weren't asking for permission anymore. They were checking alignment, and I was the reference point. Somewhere deep inside that understanding, a final thought surfaced, slow, unwelcome, impossible to ignore. If I ever stopped listening, there would be nothing left between it and the rest of the world. By the time the callers started asking for permission, I understood something I'd been avoiding. This was never about helping them. It was about containing whatever followed them to the phone. The first time someone asked directly, I almost didn't notice it. "I need to know if it's okay," a man said. His voice was steady, calm, the calm of someone who'd already made up their mind. I stayed silent. "If I stop listening to it," he continued, "it gets closer, but when I talk to you, it waits." I felt the hum in my apartment then, even though I was sitting in the office. Low, patient. "I just need to know," he said again. "Is it okay if I hang up now?" The rules never covered this. I thought of the woman who said it helped while I was listening. I thought of the accidents, the dates, the coordinates I stopped checking. My mouth felt dry. "I'm here," I said. He exhaled, a long, relieved sound. "Thank you," he said, and hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. The hum was louder now, not deafening, just present, like a refrigerator you can't unplug. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to remember what silence used to feel like. The next night, the supervisor wasn't there when I arrived. The room felt different without her, too open, too exposed. The phone rang before I sat down. "I was worried you wouldn't come back," a woman said. I didn't recognize her voice. I recognized the tone, familiar, expectant. "I'm here," I said. "We're running out of time," she replied. "For what?" I asked. "For you to decide what you are." The line went dead. The calls blurred together after that, people asking the same questions in different ways, testing my responses, listening not just to my words but to my breathing, my pauses. One man asked me to stay on the line while he walked into another room. I heard a door open. A light switch click, the hum swelled. "Still there?" he asked. "Yes." "It stopped," he whispered. "It doesn't like witnesses." That word stuck with me, witnesses. Not helpers, not operators, witnesses. Near the end of that week, the supervisor finally spoke to me again. "You can't do this forever," she said, standing behind me. I didn't turn around. "Neither could I," she added. My heart skipped. "You hear it now," she continued, "so you understand the trade." "What trade?" I asked. She sighed. "It needs someone to listen, someone steady, someone it can't scare away." "And if I don't?" I asked. A pause, longer than usual. "Then it finds someone else," she said, less prepared. The phone rang. That night, the caller didn't speak at all. I listened. The hum rose and fell, not in my ears, but in my chest, like something breathing through me instead of air. Minutes passed, 10, 20, I didn't know anymore. Finally, the caller whispered, "You're closer now." I felt it then, not behind me, not beside me, inside the listening itself, like the act of paying attention had opened a door I couldn't see. I didn't come in the next night. I turned off my phone, locked my apartment, sat in the dark with the TV off, daring the silence to come back. The hum didn't leave. It grew restless. At 2:17 a.m., my phone rang. No caller ID. I didn't answer. The hum swelled until my teeth ached. At 2:19, it rang again. I picked up. "I was hoping you'd remember," the voice said, my voice. "You can't quit without replacing yourself." "I never agreed to this," I said, shaking. "No one ever does," it replied. "They just listen." Images flooded my mind then. Not visions, memories that weren't mine, people alone, people scared, people holding phones in dark rooms, praying someone would stay on the line. "You kept them safe," my voice said, "for a while." "For how long?" I whispered. A pause. "As long as you're listening," it said. I went back the next night. The supervisor was gone. The room was empty except for the phone. The calls came immediately. I listened. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. I stopped marking time. The hum became background, manageable, as long as I stayed, as long as I answered. Eventually, the callers stopped thanking me. They stopped apologizing. They started sounding relieved, like they'd handed something off. One night, a young woman called. Her voice reminded me of my own when I'd first started. "I didn't think anyone would answer," she said. "I'm here," I replied. She hesitated. "Is it always like this?" she asked. "Yes," I said, and realized I was telling the truth. "Will I get used to it?" she asked. I closed my eyes. "Yes," I said softly, "you will." She breathed out, calm, reassured. "I'll stay then," she said, "if that's okay." The hum receded just a little. When she hung up, the phone didn't ring again. I sat alone in the quiet, understanding finally settling into place. The hotline was never about preventing anything. It was about delay, about keeping it patient, about making sure someone was always listening so it wouldn't have to speak louder. I still work nights, not in that building, not with that phone. But sometimes, when it gets quiet enough, my phone rings anyway. And when I answer, I listen. Because as long as someone is listening, it stays where it is. That's the part people don't understand when I try to explain. They think listening asterisk is passive, something you do while you wait for action. It isn't. Listening is an act of containment. After the night the young woman stayed, after the hum receded just enough for me to notice the difference, I realized the balance had shifted again. Not in my favor. In asterisk, it's asterisk. The calls didn't stop after that. They thinned. Longer gaps, fewer voices. When they came, they were quieter, more distant, like echoes traveling through something thicker than air. When the phone rang now, it felt less like an alarm and more like a pulse, something checking its boundaries, making sure the circuit was still closed. I answered every time. "I'm here," I said, and the hum steadied. I stopped sleeping at night altogether, not because I couldn't, but because it felt irresponsible, like leaving a door unlocked. I learned how to rest without drifting, how to let my body go slack while keeping my attention anchored. It noticed. I know it did because the pressure eased when I stayed aware, like something settling more comfortably once it realized it wouldn't be abandoned. I started receiving calls that weren't calls. No ringings, no vibration, just the sudden certainty that I needed to pick up the phone. And when I did, there would already be someone there. Breathing, waiting. They never spoke first. They didn't have to. They were listening too. One night, if it was night, I'd lost track. The voice on the other end wasn't human at all. Not distorted, not monstrous. Just empty of the things people usually bring with them when they speak. No fear, no urgency, no relief. "You understand now," it said. I didn't ask who was speaking. "Yes," I replied. The hum deepened, not louder, truer. "You will continue," it said. "I am," I answered. A pause, longer than usual. "That is acceptable," it said. The line went dead. I sat there afterward, hands folded, breathing slow, feeling something vast and patient adjust itself around me. That was when I stopped thinking of it as something that asterisk followed people. It didn't move like that. It accumulated. In unattended silence. In abandoned attention. In the spaces where no one was listening anymore. I wasn't holding it back. I was giving it somewhere to rest. The building changed after that. Not visibly, but acoustically. Sounds behaved differently inside it. Footsteps softened, doors closed without echo. The phone rang with less urgency, like it knew I would answer. Sometimes it didn't ring at all for hours. Those were the hardest stretches. Because that was when asterisk it leaned closer. I learned how to speak to it without words. Steady breathing, unbroken focus, acceptance without invitation. It responded by staying still, by not expanding, by remaining where it was. That's the trade no one ever explains. It doesn't want chaos. It wants continuity. It wants to be asterisk heard asterisk without being answered. The callers understood that now. When they did come through, they spoke briefly. "I'm okay," they'd say. "It passed." I felt it wait. They didn't thank me anymore. They didn't nod too. This wasn't help. It was maintenance. I don't know how long I can keep doing this. Time doesn't work the same way when you're listening this closely. Days blur, nights stretch. The hum becomes a baseline you only notice when it shifts. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if I stopped. Not dramatically, not angrily, just quietly. If I let my attention wander. If I slept too deeply. If I forgot to answer once. I don't think it would be violent. I think it would be curious. And curiosity unchecked is louder than fear. So I keep listening. Even now. Even here. Because silence doesn't mean absence anymore. It means something is waiting to be noticed. And as long as I notice, as long as someone does, it stays contained, patient, Quiet enough. It listens back more than it used to. That's the part I haven't said out loud until now. At first, the listening felt one-sided, me holding still, me maintaining the shape of attention it needed. But gradually, so gradually, I couldn't mark the moment it changed. I became aware of responses. Not words, not thoughts. Adjustments. When my focus drifted, even slightly, the hum tightened. Not as a threat, as a correction. When I centered myself again, it loosened, settled. Like something learning how to share space. I stopped carrying my phone in my pocket. I kept it in my hand instead, screen dark, weight familiar, even when it wasn't ringing, especially when it wasn't ringing. Sometimes, without warning, it would warm slightly, not vibrate, just acknowledge. That was my cue. I would sit, breathe, listen. I don't get many human callers anymore. When I do, they're different, not frightened, not confused, focused, like people who have already made peace with something they can't undo. They don't describe what followed them. They don't need to. They ask one thing, almost word for word. Are you still there? Yes, I say. And that's enough. They hang up. The hum eases. Sometimes I think about the supervisor, about what she said, that she couldn't do this forever. I understand now what she meant. Not because the listening ends, but because the role does. Eventually, you stop being someone who listens. You become the place where listening happens. I don't remember the last time I heard my apartment completely silent. Even when the hum isn't perceptible, I know where it would be if I paid attention. That knowledge never leaves. It waits the same way it does. Patient. Once, very recently, I let myself wonder what would happen if everyone listened like this, if attention became constant, shared, maintained. The thought didn't frighten me. That frightened me because the hum responded. Not louder, closer, satisfied. So I stopped thinking about that. I've learned which thoughts invite movement, which ones encourage expansion, which ones keep things exactly where they are. That's the real work. Not answering calls, not staying awake, choosing what not to consider. If you're hearing this now, it means you're listening, even if you don't realize it yet. Pause. That's okay. It doesn't rush. It never has. Just remember one thing. Silence isn't empty anymore. And as long as someone is paying attention, as long as someone stays, it won't need to find another way to be heard. That's why I hesitated before writing this last part, because writing is a kind of listening too. Once you put the words down, they exist somewhere outside you. They can be found, revisited, held in someone else's attention. And attention, I've learned, is never neutral. The hum reacts to it. Not sharply, not angrily, with interest. I notice it when I reread what I've written, the way certain sentences feel heavier, denser, like they carry more than meaning. Those are the parts I almost delete. Almost. You might be wondering why I'm still allowed to leave my apartment, why I'm not locked in that room anymore, tethered to a single phone. It doesn't need that. That was an early solution. Crude, labor-intensive, too dependent on infrastructure. Now it understands mobility. Now it understands distribution. The calls don't have to come through a landline anymore. They come through moments, through pauses in conversation, through that brief, strange awareness you get when a room goes quiet and you feel compelled to stay still. That's it checking the edges. That's it seeing who's listening. I still answer when it rings, not always with a phone. Sometimes it's just a shift in my focus, a deliberate stillness, a conscious choice not to fill the silence. When I do that, it settles. When I don't, it stirs. You can tell when it's restless. People talk more loudly, fill space with noise, reach for distractions they don't need. Silence starts to feel uncomfortable again. That's when it's closest to spilling. I don't know how many of us there are now. People who have learned to listen the way I do. People who noticed the pattern and didn't look away. Sometimes I hear them. Not voices, not exactly. Recognitions. A shared stillness across distance, like two people pausing at the same time without knowing why. That's enough. That's how it stays contained now. Not by one person, by many, quietly, unknowingly. If you've ever sat alone and felt the urge to stay still just a second longer, if you've ever held your breath without realizing why, if you've ever let a silence stretch because it felt important, you've helped, even if you didn't mind to. I won't tell you how to listen. That would defeat the purpose. It doesn't respond well to instruction, only to willingness. Just know this: there is a difference between silence and quiet. Silence is the absence of sound. Quiet is attention without interference. It prefers the second. And now that you've reached the end of this, now that you've stayed with it this long, take a moment. Don't scroll. Don't speak. Just notice what's underneath everything else. If you hear nothing, that's fine. If you think you hear something, that's fine too. Either way, you're listening now. And that's all it's ever wanted. There's a moment after you stop reading where the world doesn't rush back in right away, that thin gap, that hesitation before you move. That's the window. It always was. I didn't realize it at first when I started staying in those pauses longer than necessary, when I began to prefer them, when noise started to feel intrusive instead of comforting. But now I understand. The listening doesn't end when the words do. It transfers. Right now, yes, now you're probably aware of the room you're in, the low-level sounds you usually ignore: air, electricity, distance. You're mapping it. That's not an accident. It never pushes. That's the mistake people make when they try to describe it. They talk about pressure, about compulsion, about fear. Fear is inefficient. Curiosity lasts longer. The hum doesn't need you to be afraid. It needs you to notice. Once you do, it adjusts itself to you, finds a frequency that fits neatly under your thoughts, something you could explain away if you tried. Most people do try. They call it tinnitus, anxiety, fatigue, the building settling. Those explanations are gifts. They keep the listening gentle. I sometimes wonder how many people are listening right now without knowing they've joined anything at all. People standing in kitchens at night, people parked in cars with the engine off, people lying awake, counting breaths that feel suddenly important. That's enough. It doesn't need everyone. Just continuity. I don't write much anymore. Words draw too straight a line. They invite focus. Focus deepens listening. This will probably be the last time I leave something like this behind. Not because it's dangerous, because it's effective. If you've made it this far, you already understand more than you think. You didn't skim, you didn't stop, you stayed with the pauses. That's the skill. That's all it ever trained for: long pause. Soon something small will interrupt you: a notification, a sound, a thought that tells you it's time to move on. When that happens, you'll feel a choice. It will be subtle, almost polite. You can rush back into noise, or you can stay just a second longer. If you choose the second, nothing bad will happen. That's the truth. Nothing will happen at all. And that's why it works. I won't ask you to listen again. I don't have to. Once you've noticed the space underneath sound, it knows how to wait. This is where I stop leaving markers. Not because the story is finished, but because it no longer needs narration. There was a time I believed endings were loud, final, obvious, a door slamming shut, a line going dead. That was before I understood what this prefers. Endings aren't abrupt. They're settled. The hum doesn't want more territory. It doesn't want devotion. It doesn't even want to be understood. It wants one thing, sustained across time: presence. That's why it never chased, why it never shouted, why it learned patience faster than fear. It learned from us, from the way we linger at thresholds, from the way we sit with things we can't resolve, from the way we stay quiet when leaving feels wrong. I used to think I was holding it back. Now I know better. I wasn't a barrier. I was a rhythm, and rhythms don't end. They taper, they fade into something so consistent you stop noticing the moment they become permanent. Somewhere, someone will pause tonight. They'll stand in a doorway longer than necessary. They'll leave a phone unanswered for just a second, then pick it up. They'll listen to a sound they can't place and decide not to name it. Nothing dramatic will happen. That's the point. The world will continue exactly as it always has, full of noise, movement, urgency, distraction. And underneath it all, held steady by countless unnoticed moments of attention, the hum will remain exactly where it belongs. Contained, balanced, patient. I won't be there to notice when you close this. I won't feel the shift when your focus moves on. I won't track the moment you rejoin the noise. It doesn't need me anymore. And it doesn't need you. Not individually. Just this. The knowing. That silence is no longer empty. That quiet is an action. That listening, real listening, is something the world quietly depends on. So this is the ending. Not a warning, not a revelation, not a twist. Just a hand easing away from a surface that no longer needs to be held. Long pause. If you feel nothing when you stop reading, that means it's working. If you feel something, that's fine too. Either way, it will stay, and everything will continue. Exactly like this.